Friends, remember this guy? This was Bill Clinton in 1998. And he clogged up 4 of his arteries by the age of 58, and he needed a quadruple cardiac bypass in, I believe, 2004. And then 6 years later, he again clogged up half of those arteries, and he needed stents. And he finally wised up and dramatically changed his lifestyle. And now it's 16 years later. He hasn't had another procedure since then. And he's, I believe, 79 years old. He is the first person in the last 4 generations to have lived over 70.
2 days ago, I turned 78, the oldest man in my family for 4 generations.
So in this video, we're going to talk about why Bill Clinton's lifestyle worked for him and how you can benefit from a similar lifestyle. Now, when it comes to unclogging arteries, most people think clogged arteries are a plumbing problem that starts with cholesterol. But when scientists dissect clogged arteries, this is a model of a clogged artery, it's actually filled with immune cells called macrophages. So clogged arteries, they're a result of a plumbing problem, but they begin as an injury and repair problem with your immune system. So let's talk about the ways that can injure your arteries to cause macrophages to clog your arteries. Now, my name is Dr. Liu, and I'm a double board certified physician practicing for almost 30 years. And all physicians deal with clogged arteries because blood is a source for life, and the lack of blood is a source of disease. And when you block your arteries, you block your blood flow and you increase your risk of getting lots of infectious diseases. And way too many people, like Bill Clinton, they think that medical procedures can roto-rooter out their clogged arteries, and he learned the hard way. Even bypasses don't bypass clogged arteries. They eventually happen again. And unfortunately, our procedures can't reach small blood vessels, which makes up most of your body. So the problem is more upstream. What's the root cause? What is injury your arterial wall in the first place? And if you can prevent the injury, then you can prevent the blockage that will continue even if you get a new bypass. Now, the immune system, it makes plaques all over the body, so it's not like any other part is spared. And one of the biggest signals to make clogged arteries or to harm your immune system in your blood vessels is your blood pressure. And that's a number over 120/80. Now, blood pressure is not just a number on a cuff, but it's actually a force. So if your blood pressure is high, every heartbeat becomes a tiny hammer against the blood vessel lining. Of course, one beat does not destroy the artery usually, unless you're FDR, but millions of beats over years injure that inner lining of your blood vessels. And even 5 points above normal is damaging. Now, 5 points may look very tiny on a blood pressure machine, but to your arteries, it means more force, more stretch, more stress to the inner lining with every heartbeat. And that inner lining, that's called the endothelium. And when the endothelium is not beat up, it's actually smooth, like here, and it's calm and flexible and protective. But when that lining is injured, the artery kind of grows a pimple because it becomes reactive. It becomes inflamed, and that causes cholesterol-carrying particles to get trapped inside these immune cells to make that pimple. And those immune cells are called macrophages. So these macrophages, they actually turn fat and foamy. Have you ever eaten like a greasy meal and then feel awful? Well, that's how foamy macrophages feel, and then they release SOS inflammatory molecules to cry for help. And that's why the first step in unclogging your arteries is to get your blood pressure normal. However, the solution is not simply take a pill and forget about it. Blood pressure medications, they can be life-saving. So if you need to take a pill, you should take a pill. Work with your physician. And don't stop your blood pressure medications just because it's normal, because it's probably keeping you normal. Talk to your own medical doctor. The better question is, why is your blood pressure high in the first place? Because whatever is making it high is likely also driving inflammation to the arteries to make these foamy macrophages. Now, there are several things that are well known to cause high blood pressure. Number one is not enough potassium in your food. Number two is becoming insulin resistant. Number three is having sleep apnea. Number four is to be chronically stressed. Number five is then drinking alcohol to mitigate that stress. Number six is bad kidney function. Number seven is gaining weight. Number eight is a low nitric oxide. And number nine is a lack of movement. And number 10 is excess sodium. So logically, the first step to unclogging arteries is to remove the drivers that increase your blood pressure. And that starts with measuring your blood pressure correctly to know if you have high blood pressure. So here's how you should do it. You sit quietly for 5 minutes. You put your feet flat. Your back is supported. Your arm is at your heart level. And you want to make sure you have the correct cuff size. You don't want to talk, and you don't want to measure it after caffeine, exercise, nicotine, stress, or rushing. Take 2 readings and average them. And the easiest thing to remove, in theory, is ultra-processed foods that are salty or even sweet. However, that's really not the only salt that's a problem, right? I mentioned potassium, and that's a salt that needs to be added in your diet, whereas sodium needs to be removed. Now, this is not taking electrolytes or supplements. This is actually looking for whole foods. Now, the standard American diet has too much sodium and too little potassium. The potassium-sodium balance is really needed to have a healthy blood pressure and healthy heart function. And that's because potassium-rich foods, they help your body handle the sodium, and they help your blood vessels relax so it's not so tight and so small. So unless your doctor has told you to restrict potassium because you have kidney disease or on certain medications, then you really need to go out of your way to find potassium. So how do you find it? Well, foods like beans, lentils, potatoes, sweet potatoes, leafy greens, tomatoes, squashes, oranges, kiwi, bananas, edamame beans, mushrooms, and lots of other vegetables, they all have potassium. And when you eat these foods, they change actually your biology, not only to lower your blood pressure, but to benefit all your muscles in your body. So here's another reason to eat plants and to eat these certain plants. Because when you eat these plants, you lather your arteries in nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is one of the most important artery relaxing molecules in the body. It tells the blood vessels to relax. That means a blood vessel lumen, it gets bigger when it relaxes. Now, of course, it's not broken apart like this. Now, when nitric oxide is healthy, arteries are more flexible. Blood flows more easily. Your platelets, which are clotting factors, they are activated by your immune system, and they are less likely to stick in the presence of nitric oxide. Your vascular resistance improves. Now notice how when I talk about your arteries, I'm talking about changes because they're dynamic. They're not like fixed pipes. And the problem is that nitric oxide actually can go down for a number of reasons, including if you have high blood pressure or chronic inflammation. Then it's not going to be as effective. And that's why it's vital to get normal blood pressure. Now, here's a list of foods that are rich with nitric oxide. Leafy greens like arugula, spinach, beets, celery, bok choy, Swiss chard, parsley, cilantro, even lettuce, and other nitrate-rich vegetables contain nitric oxide. Technically, they actually have nitrate, which gets turned into nitrite, and then nitrite gets turned into nitric oxide. And this pathway actually starts in your mouth because you have bacteria that converts a nitrate into nitrite. And that means that your mouth is part of your arterial system. And that's why it's important to take care of your mouth. That means your gums, your saliva, your oral bacteria, and your blood vessels are all connected. So if you have bad oral hygiene, you'll have bad cardiovascular problems. You may also want to reconsider those mouthwashes that kill 99.9% of germs because you kind of need those germs, at least the good ones. Now, don't confuse nitrates in plants with nitrates in preserved meats. Unfortunately, the protein with the nitrates, they react together, and then that forms a new compound called nitrosamines, which is actually quite toxic and considered to be cancerous. Hence, preserved meats should be reduced, if not avoided altogether. So let's now talk about blood sugar. By the way, many of you have commented that you weren't sure if you were subscribed. Now, if you find value in this video, could you please check? And if you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and then hit the share button. And if you've already subscribed, thank you for joining me to change the world. Now, most people, they think of diabetes as a blood sugar disease, but you know, diabetes is also a clogged artery disease. Have you ever heated up sugar in a pan? You know, remember what happens? It melts, and then it turns brown, and then it hardens, right? Hardens into a rock. So when you eat sugar, it melts in your body because your body's warm, and then the sugar comes out of the solution, which is your blood, and it can stick to stuff, right? And this happens all over your body. Sugar sticks to all different kinds of molecules, including proteins, and that induces oxidative stress and inflammation. And what happens with inflammation? You get pimples. So then that causes your immune system to react, right? To make these pimples. So ultimately, because of high blood sugars, your blood vessels, they lose their flexibility. And again, you get clogged up. So insulin itself can also drive this whole inflammatory cascade, even if your blood sugars get lower. And that is why lowering your insulin sensitivity matters, not just lowering your blood sugars. That's definitely not the same as having normal blood sugars, because when you have normal blood sugars, you may still have high insulin levels and become or be insulin resistant, because blood sugars are really a marker of how your body responds to carbohydrates. And if it's not responding well, or if you need a lot of insulin, you're insulin resistant. And this is a very common condition in people who are pre-diabetic. Now, you can also be insulin resistant even if you avoid all carbohydrates. You can also take extra insulin to counteract your high blood sugars, right? Exogenous insulin because you have type 1 diabetes. So let's not confuse the symptom of high blood sugar with the cause of high blood sugar. The real cause of insulin resistance, get this, is accumulation of fat. And there are many different ways to get excess fat. You can eat excess calories. Everything you eat can be turned into, you get it, fat. You can be overweight, and then you're shedding these fat cells or these fatty acids in your body all the time to then plug up your mitochondria. So the first step to getting insulin sensitive is really to avoid added sugar and refined starch. So that means your soda, your juice, your sugary coffee and tea, energy drinks, or snacking, white bread, pastries, cereals, chips, crackers, desserts. I mean, this whole video could be about low fiber processed foods that keep signaling your body with the wrong hormones. And I think the worst offender of all is liquid sugar, because it hits your body fast. It doesn't make you full. It pushes your glucose up as well as your insulin up, and it can raise your triglycerides. It can overload your liver, and it sends like tons of inflammatory signals to your blood vessels all over your body, right? So processed foods that are full of sugar and refined starches, you really should consider replacing them with whole carbohydrates, such as beans and lentils, oats, barley, quinoa, potatoes, sweet potatoes, fruits. Eat a ton of fruits. I love my fruits. And of course, vegetables. These are not the same as all those ultra-processed chips and crackers, pastries, white bread, sugary cereals, right? Intact carbohydrates from the original package from nature has fiber, has potassium, has magnesium, resistant starch, polyphenols, antioxidants. It's a whole package that you're getting along with food structure.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
And another way to unclog your arteries and get insulin sensitive is to move after you eat. Because your muscles, it can pull glucose out of your bloodstream. You have 650 muscles, use them. That lowers your burden of sugar, which lowers your amount of insulin you need to release. So if glucose and insulin are lower after meals, then your liver has less fuel to overload. The arteries get less sugar to clog them up, and the whole system just gets calmer. Even 2 minutes helps after your meals. But of course, the more the better. So if you move 10 minutes, that's even better. And remember, when you move, you're not only drawing out sugar, you're keeping your blood flowing. You're keeping your muscles to be your best glucose sink, right? You're making them practice. The more metabolically active your muscles are, the less glucose gets dumped to places it shouldn't be at. And then you have less inflammation in your arteries to clog them up. So if you're serious about protecting your arteries, you got to move, folks. You got to move intentionally, and you have to build muscles. So things that you could do are squats, wall sits, resistance bands, push-ups, rows, lunges, step-ups, weights. They all matter, and you should rotate it. If you've never done any of it, go get yourself a trainer so you don't injure yourself. You're not just exercising to burn calories, folks. You're exercising to build muscle, to build that metabolic organ, your muscles, to protect your arteries. Oh, by the way, do you smoke? If so, stop smoking. In fact, if you smoke, that's the single most important first step that you could do to unclog your arteries before everything else. Smoking directly injures blood vessels. It increases oxidative stress. It makes blood more clot prone, and it stimulates your immune system to worsen the environment inside your blood vessels. It reduces the amount of oxygen you get. It accelerates plaque formation. I mean, I can go on and on. Need I say more? I would like to go back to insulin. Now, ever heard of visceral fat? That's the stuff inside your belly. So the fat under your skin is not the same kind of fat as the stuff around your organs. That's visceral fat. And visceral fat is metabolically active, kind of like your muscles, except that it works against you. It releases inflammatory signals and free fatty acids to worsen your insulin resistance. So it contributes to high blood sugars, high triglycerides, fatty liver, high blood pressure, and vascular dysfunction. So if someone has belly fat inside around their organs, and they have high triglycerides, high blood pressure, low HDL, prediabetes, fatty liver, sleep apnea, this is all not separate. This is the same problem. It's a metabolic syndrome. And the arteries they get a direct hit from the metabolic chaos. So if that is you, then you can get healthy by losing weight. Now, the goal is not crash dieting. Crash dieting will make you lose muscle, right? Which goes against metabolic health. It triggers hunger. It reduces metabolic rate. It leads to rebound, more weight gain. So how can you lose weight while preserving your muscle? So let's go back to step one. Cut out the ultra-processed food. And then center your meals on high fiber, low calorie, intact, whole plant foods. In addition, remove the alcohol and improve your sleep quality. Now, start by adding whole plant foods to displace the harmful foods. Add some beans to your diet, some lentils, some chickpeas, split peas, oats, barley, vegetables and fruits, leafy greens and mushrooms, potatoes, sweet potatoes, right? Tofu, tempeh, edamame beans, flax seeds, nuts and seeds, chia seeds, walnuts. These are all things you can add. They're not diet food. Just eat them first. They can help to unclog your arteries, help to fill you up, and help you wean off the junk. Now, when people actually examine the plaque, they found fats, right? You have different kinds of fats in your artery. So one fat is called triglycerides. That will rise when your liver is shipping out excess energy, especially when the body is struggling with insulin resistance, or fatty liver, or excess sugar, or excess refined starch, or alcohol, or just eating excess calories. So anyone struggling with any of these conditions, they're going to have high triglycerides. And high triglycerides, it's basically not just a lab number. They are a signal that tells you that your liver is exporting too much fuel because there's too much around. And when triglycerides are high, your good HDL is often low, your insulin resistance is often high, and your LDL cholesterol particles, they become more inflammatory, smaller and more numerous. And we're going to go into LDL cholesterol a little bit later. Now, this pattern is linked to metabolic dysfunction. So by now, you're probably wondering, how do you get your triglycerides to a normal value? Well, remove liquid sugar and then reduce the refined starches. Eliminate alcohol because alcohol will raise triglycerides, your blood pressure, worsen sleep, and add stress to your liver. Now, replace the ultra-processed foods with intact carbohydrates, like fiber, like what I mentioned, beans, lentils. They're one of the best examples because they give you that starchy feeling, yet they're full of fiber, resistant starch, which you can't digest, full of protein, minerals, polyphenols, and together they lower your blood sugars and your triglycerides, not only in this meal that you're eating it with, but in this subsequent meal. And like I said, there are lots of fats, including cholesterol, that travel in your bloodstream. And online, there's a lot of confusion about cholesterol, and people are left wondering if high cholesterol matters. And the simple answer is yes, because plaque contains cholesterol. But cholesterol is not just one number, and knowing what your total cholesterol is not enough because cholesterol is separated into different types of cholesterol protein carriers. And these cholesterol protein carriers are basically the trucks that carry cholesterol from one end of the pipe to the other. Unfortunately, every truck that carries cholesterol can block traffic. So those are the protein carriers. And you actually need to know how many trucks are on the lanes so that you can calculate how blocked your traffic is. And that's actually a different measurement. That's called ApoB. That gives a better estimate of the number of trucks or particles that are carrying cholesterol that will eventually get stuck in macrophages. So the more ApoB you have floating around in your bloodstream, the higher the chances macrophages will gobble them up and be foamy and cause inflammation. And that eventually clogs your artery. And the best way to reduce how much ApoB you have is to reduce foods with saturated fat. So if your goal is unclogging your arteries, then the more saturated fat you eat, the more clogged your arteries will be because the more ApoB you'll have. So that includes butter, cheese, cream cheese, fatty meats, processed meats, ghee, coconut oil, fast food, pastries, desserts, right? All those snacks. Things that have high saturated fat will all raise your LDL cholesterol and it will worsen the congestion in your artery. And that's why the trend of eating deep fried stuff and ghee is quite a horrible idea if you want to unclog your artery. Now, I didn't even mention all the environmental toxins that accumulate in animal fat like dioxins that are actually quite poisonous. But that's a different video. But here's the important part to unclog your artery. The goal isn't just to eat less fat. The goal is to improve the environment that the artery is in. So if you lower saturated fat, but you replace it with refined sugar and white flour, that's not progress, folks. That happened in the 1990s, the low fat craze where you were told to avoid fat, but then they substituted it with sugar and refined starches. And people didn't turn out any better. In fact, people turn out worse because everybody gained a ton of weight. And then they never reduced the fat. So don't do that. The goal is to reduce inflammation. And the best way to do that is to replace your saturated fat with high fiber plant foods that contain natural fats already, unsaturated fat. So less butter and cheese and cream and fatty meats and processed meat and coconut oil and ghee, right? Less of all those fried foods and pastries, and convert that into monounsaturated fats. You can use that to cook your beans, your lentils, your tofu, your tempeh, right? You can eat nuts and seeds that have those monounsaturated fats. You can eat avocado. Do you know what all these foods, whole foods that I mentioned, have in common? They all have one ingredient in common. That's fiber. Fiber is the number one most powerful arterial tool for you to work on multiple systems at once. Why? Helps you lower your cholesterol. It removes your bile to reduce it from recycling so that your body has to pull out more cholesterol. It feeds your gut microbiome. It helps you to get full so that you don't overeat and therefore you lose weight. It improves your insulin sensitivity so you lose weight even faster. It improves your triglycerides, your cholesterol numbers. Fiber helps lower your blood pressure as well as inflammation. It also, if you're eating whole food fiber, contains potassium and magnesium, which most of the country is not getting enough of. But remember, this isn't eating fiber from a can, folks. This is eating actual whole foods, right? Plate your foods with fiberless foods. And if you can replace some of the fiberless foods on your plate with fiber-rich foods, your arteries will get the right signal to reduce inflammation. So how much fiber should you eat in a day? I would say at least 30 grams. The size, the limit. But if you're not used to that much fiber, I would do it very slowly and drink a lot of water. So don't just eat a bowl of beans or lentils or chickpeas. You got to start with one at a time, right? Literally one bean at a time. Slowly increase fiber-rich foods so that they're not just side dishes and they start replacing your main meals. This is the arterial medicine Bill Clinton used. And when you eat these whole food fibers, you breed a healthy gut microbiome, you reduce inflammation, you lose a ton of weight, and it changes your whole metabolism. It changes your insulin sensitivity and immune signaling. And what you feed your gut actually determines what your gut produces. So if you eat a low fiber, ultra processed food diet, that creates a pretty inflammatory environment as opposed to if you eat a fiber-rich, plant-forward, whole food diet. And this is why the first step of unclogging your arteries is not avoid bad foods. It's also feed the system that repairs you. Feed your gut, right? There's so many options to choose from. It's so important to feed your friends and to be strategic at what you're feeding it. Because not all foods are equally powerful. Now, the most important thing that you can do that's free is actually to sleep. Sleep is not passive. It's actually intentional, and it's a recipe for your body to improve your blood pressure, insulin sensitivity, cortisol rhythm, hunger hormones, reduce inflammation, and allow your body to repair your blood vessels if it needs to. Now, if you're not sleeping well, this can actually go in the opposite direction, especially day after day after day. So poor sleep raises your stress hormones, worsens your cravings, increases your blood pressure, worsens your insulin resistance so that you have worsening blood sugars the next day. And unfortunately, too many people, they don't realize that they're not sleeping well because they can't breathe. There's a very common condition called sleep apnea, which repeatedly drops a person's oxygen when they sleep at night, and people don't realize it. It activates the sympathetic nervous system because you're essentially getting hypoxic or you can't breathe at night. Even though you're breathing, you're not actually getting what you need. And people who have sleep apnea, they generally snore. They wake up feeling unrefreshed. If this is you, talk to your medical provider because we have treatment. Part of the treatment is losing weight, but part of the treatment is getting enough oxygen while you're trying to lose weight. So the ideal amount of sleep is at least 7 hours. Whenever it's possible. And to achieve that, you want to keep caffeine before noontime and don't do heavy meals at night. Also, remember, avoid alcohol. You may feel relaxed, but alcohol fragments your sleep. And even if you're passed out, you're not going to have restful sleep because it prevents you from going into deep sleep. And if you snore, wake up choking, or have a morning headache, or daytime sleepiness, or you're having problems with your high blood pressure, you just can't get it controlled, or atrial fibrillation, or you just find that your metabolism is just getting worse, you may have sleep apnea. Ask your doctor about it. And untreated sleep apnea, that's a great way to hammer your blood vessels during your sleep. That's pretty stressful, isn't it? That's unconscious stress, which you don't have direct control over, except to get that sleep apnea treated. But you do have direct control over conscious stress. When you feel stressed, different hormones go up, like cortisol. Now, cortisol is not necessarily bad. It's a normal hormone that you need to wake up in the morning And it also helps to maintain your blood pressure. I mean, you need it to live. But the problem is when you have cortisol all the time, because it regulates inflammation. And when you have high cortisol all the time, your body is in a state of constant inflammation. So that's the problem with chronically elevated cortisol from chronic stress. And that will worsen your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your visceral fat, your appetite, inflammation, and the pressure on your blood vessels. So stress is going to make your arteries tighten so that the same blood pressure is going to do more damage. But remember, stress is not only emotional, right? Poor sleep of any sort, especially sleep apnea or, medications such as alcohol, or when you're eating, ultra processed stuff, can also cause unconscious stress, which leads to more inflammation. And part of de-stressing your body is to get yourself into a good daily routine. So that means in the morning, go get sunlight by walking outside. Practice deep, slow breathing, box breathing. Strength train, right? At least 3 times a week, resistance training, and allow your body to recover. And remember, if you need caffeine, do it earlier. So all these things, they can help you unclog your artery. But of course, plaque is not going to disappear overnight. You're not going to be pouring Drano in, right? Some plaques can regress modestly, but really the goal is to stabilize these soft plaques that kind of break off. And because when these break off, they can cause an acute blockage, right? And that's what we don't want to happen. So a stable plaque, one that's like rooted here where it can't come off, is unlikely to rupture. And that's why when you lower your blood pressure to reduce mechanical stress, and when you lower ApoB to reduce the traffic that causes inflammation in the wall, and you get better insulin sensitivity, lower your glucose, all this while increasing your nitric oxide can make a better arterial environment so that you have less plaque growth and less plaque rupture, like what happened to Bill Clinton. And when you do these things, that's real prevention. So how do you do some of this stuff? Watch the next video and I'll show you.